In today's video, CNN has to painfully admit that inflation is coming down. Democrats are continuing to argue against the SAVE Act, and a new poll shows that Democrats have lost the working class.
Jessica, this is the second day in a row we're getting some encouraging news on the cost of living. The one catch, and it is a big one, is that it does not fully capture the impact of the trade war, right? This is measuring prices in March before the full impact of all of the tariff increases. Well, let me run you through the numbers first. So we're talking about the producer price index. This is wholesale inflation before it gets to all of us as consumers. And we were expecting an increase in prices month over month. We did not get that. We got a drop in prices. Look at this, 0.4%. That is much better than anticipated. The annual rate, we were anticipating around 3.3%. We did not get that. We got a much lower number, 2.7%. This is a deceleration. And when we look at the trend, we can see that things have certainly improved from a few years ago when it comes to inflation. This metric, graphic's not up right now, but this metric was around 11%.
I want you to do it from memory.
So it was really, really high. It has come down significantly. Now, why was this number better than expected? There's a few factors. One of them is energy, right? We've seen oil prices plunge. That has lowered the cost of energy when you think about gasoline and diesel.
Yeah, so in this first story, it's all about the economy because we're getting great news again, as you seen in that clip. Now, before I get to that, let's just address the propaganda in the room. You see how he introduced the good news and then he pulled it back and said, well, this doesn't calculate the tariff war or the trade war that's happening. They did the same thing with President Trump's approval rating a couple of weeks back. And what happened? His approval rating went up. So I wish they would just stick to the facts and just withhold the propaganda for later in the show. I think that's fair to say. We know this is great news. It makes sense why this is happening. It's due to energy. It's what President Trump promised he would do. However, Democrats have a different spin on what's happening with the economy. Take a look.
But this crazy tariff war that nobody asked for, where he basically is invoking emergency powers, the same thing that he did under the Alien Enemies Act, like the fact that no one is questioning his mental acuity or fitness to serve is beyond wild to me, right? Like the fact that they sat around, called Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe Biden, and as I said before, at least you could sleep at night because you didn't have to worry about your 401k disappearing overnight. You didn't have to worry about these allegations of fake invasions. You didn't have to worry about the cost of food just skyrocketing or skyrocketing cost of all of your electronics.
All right, so the only way to respond to someone like her, who clearly is ignorant about this, doesn't care about what the truth is to make sure that the facts are communicated properly. Eggs from 2021 to 2024 saw a 103% increase in prices. Gasoline saw a 55% increase from $2.25 to $3.50. Rent saw a 22% increase. Electricity saw a 15% increase. Used cars saw a 40% increase. And the number that really matters is the consumer price index saw a 21% increase. So trying to blame President Trump for why prices are high is ridiculous. If you want to criticize the strategy that he is deploying to lower prices, that's one thing. But to blame him for the prices, that's ignorant. And what else is ignorant is the left's reaction to the SAVE Act being passed yesterday. This is our next story. Here's James Carville last night claiming our elections are perfect.
Well, let's start with a massively unnecessary idea. There has been study after study, and I mean a lot of studies and good studies, to say that the amount of fraud in American elections is almost undetectable. We've looked for that forever. So you ask yourself, if an elderly person doesn't have a driver's license, or a married person takes her husband's name, which my wife chose not to, but other people do, that's people's own business. Well, they can't produce a thing saying I'm Jane Smith because the birth certificate is Jane Jones. So the other thing is not necessary. Why are we putting another bureaucratic layer to solve a problem that doesn't exist? Why don't we solve problems that actually exist, like, say, Medicaid to the states, that this budget is utterly destroyed. So I just think it's totally unnecessary. It's totally grandstanding.
See, there's two ways to debunk this entire argument from the left. Is one, if the elections are so secure and perfect, then why are you complaining about us requiring voter ID? And secondly, if you believe voter ID is voter suppression, then that would mean everything else is a suppression. Like when I got to go get a marriage certificate or birth certificate, or I got to rent a car. That is suppression, right? You see, Democrats want you to believe that when you have to follow these steps, that you are being oppressed. Read this post with me here. So we need real ID to vote now. And in order to get that, I need my marriage certificate and my birth certificate. I have my marriage certificate, but not my birth certificate, oddly enough. Turns out I just have to pay $15 to get a copy and it will be mailed to me. It was that easy, folks. Some of y'all are reaching on the oppression stuff. Now, here's Senator Slotkin also complaining about the SAVE Act.
And for 80% of women in this country who are married, they've changed their name from their birth certificate. So it makes it harder to have women vote, makes it harder if you don't have a passport. I'm all for keeping non-citizens from voting in our elections.
Why not just amend the bill to make sure that you can use your license and then, vote, say you'll vote. Would you vote yes for that?
Well, for sure. If there was a way to make it,
Doesn't seem like it should be that complicated to show your license to vote.
It's not. We tried. When we voted on it in the House, we said, hey, man, just change it, amend it. We're willing to work with you. We don't want non-citizens voting.
All right. So here's the updated information and why the SAVE Act has been revised. So originally, it was all about just show your driver's license. Well, we all have learned that at least 19 states in our country will issue a driver's license to a legal migrant. So we can't use a driver's license. You need to prove definitively that you are an American citizen. And let's not forget, this is not a right, folks. It's a privilege. But Democrats are treating it like it's a right. So let me show you. Now, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had this to say as well. The Republican SAVE Act reads more like a how-to guide for voter suppression. It goes against the very foundations of our democracy. It actually makes it harder for women who change their name after getting married to vote. It is dead on arrival in the Senate. The only problem is there's a Republican majority in the Senate. And here's what Byron Donalds had to say.
My response is Chuck Schumer's lying again when it comes to actual voting policy to protect the franchise for the American people. Number one, there's this thing called Real ID, which every state in the country now complies with, which actually protects women who go through the process of changing their name. So Chuck Schumer's lying and he's gaslighting. People need to remember that back in, I think it was 2022, you had Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, who were up in arms when Georgia changed their voting laws, rightly, mind you, and they followed the Florida model when it came to election law. And they went down to Georgia calling it Jim Crow 2.0, and they were lying because the facts were more black people in Georgia voted in the midterm elections than in the history of the state of Georgia. So once again, the Democrats are gaslighting. They are lying. They should be joining us to protect the franchise of voting in the United States of America. One thing I'll add is we've had more than 30 million people come into our country illegally. We've already seen through the work of DOGE that they have had access to register into all kind of programs. So all we're saying is proof of citizenship to make sure you're voting in American elections. It's this common sense stuff. Once again, the Democrats simply are not serious. They would prefer to gaslight than do what's right on behalf of the American people.
Well, Democrats can't do what's right because it's hard. They'd rather do the easy wrong, which is why we have to applaud President Trump. And this brings us to our next story, his tariff policy. Yes, the media is still losing their minds over it. Yes, everybody and their mom is criticizing the president, but it's the hard right. Now, here's a liberal on CNN last night giving them a reality check about the mindset behind President Trump and why he is doing this.
I've been thinking a lot about the 10 million Americans who lost their homes in the 2008 financial crisis and how President Obama's first act in office was to give $700 billion to the banks that caused it, including $30 billion in bonuses to the crooks who organized it. And I'm thinking about how those very Americans saw a president pick Wall Street over Main Street, and what they saw this whole week was a president willing to go out there and fight for the forgotten men and women of this heartland and take on the entire international global order.
Okay. First of all, you cannot say.
All right, well, we know where that was about to head, right? They can't face the reality of that message, okay? Because you're talking about people who they're just removed emotionally from the average American, okay? Once you start making the money that most of these people are making on TV, or they operate in these spaces of people who are graduating from these elite colleges and universities, they're caught in this bubble. They don't understand what most America has been going through because of the incompetence in Washington. And when you're talking about Main Street, versus Wall Street, we know who's been winning over the past 4 years. That was Wall Street. So she makes a great point. And to actually back up her point, CNN just this morning released this poll. Watch.
This, to me, is one of the most shocking pieces of poll data that I truthfully have seen this year, or maybe in any prior year.
Really?
Yes, really, because I want you to take a look. Cares more about the needs for people like you. You mentioned it, Kate Baldwin. We got a tie, even after this tariff war had already started, split between Democrats and Republicans on how people feel. Which party cares more for needs of people like you? And why is that so surprising? Because I want you to take a look at prior years. Democrats always lead on this question. Back in 2017, before the 2018 midterms, 13-point lead. 2005, a 23-point lead for Democrats. 1994, which was a big Republican year, a 19-point lead for Democrats. And now, all of a sudden, a tie? All of a sudden, the Democrats, who are the party of the people, no more. We get a tie on this question, on a question that has traditionally overwhelmingly been a Democratic advantage. Which party cares more for the needs of people like you? It's truly something I would not have expected to see, especially after this tariff war had begun.
Well, it's no surprise if you're conservative. You knew that President Trump and this entire coalition, especially his agenda, is for the average American. Now, what's interesting is I have an example to show you why this number continues to favor Republicans, because Democrats go on TV and say things like this.
Is it worth it to upend the global economy for HVAC jobs, right? Which is what Howard Lutnick is talking about, that these factories will be largely automated, but then there'll be mechanics who are, I guess, fixing the machines and fixing the robots and the HVAC systems. So they are making big promises. When they can deliver is still an open question.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is why Democrats are continuing to lose support from the average American, okay? I don't understand why they can't accept the idea that there are Americans out there that would love a six-figure HVAC job because they know it solves a problem. And not just that, it solves a problem for their neighbors, their brothers, their sisters, their communities. It's a job that actually matters. Oh, but hey, let's not upset the global economy and the world order, right? Let's just continue to sell out the middle class for the elites in Wall Street. I mean, that is their thinking, and that's why they're going to continue to lose. Now, here's another example of why Democrats are continuing to be out of touch with the average American. Watch this clip that went viral last night where a congresswoman claimed that she now regrets voting for the SAVE Act.
The question was about due process, and since it's for people who are accused and charged with crimes but not necessarily convicted of them, what do you make of the concerns about due process?
So I understand your concerns, and I understand how immigrants across this country who are here legally and have followed the law are being terrorized right now because they are unsure of what happens next. I voted for that piece of legislation because of a very specific provision, and it was if it caused injury or death to a police officer, which was one small piece of it. There were other things about, to your point, Caitlin, someone who was was charged but hadn't been convicted. As I've thought about it over the last couple months, I probably would have voted differently. Yeah,
well, the only way to respond to her is stating the facts, okay? This is finally the first piece of legislation, we're talking about the Lincoln-Riley Act, that was signed into law to address the alarming issue after what Joe Biden did to this country. He allowed over 10 million illegal migrants to cross the border. Even when they were caught, what happened? They were released into our communities. Financially, emotionally, and definitely when you're talking about crime, our communities suffered. And that's why the Democratic Party's brand is suffering, and why you're continuing to see in this poll that CNN published today that they're losing support from the average American.
Where does it show that Republicans are making the most gains?
Yeah, again, you talk about party of the people. Look at this. Cares for the needs of people like yourself. Look here, we got non-college, we got those with a college degree. Among those with a college degree, it's the same score. 8 plus 18 points for Democrats in 2017, plus 18 points for Democrats now. But look among non-college voters. Look here. It was plus 7 for Democrats in 2017, and now Republicans had overwhelmingly gained, plus 9 points. That is, the gains have been concentrated, at least within the last decade, among voters without a college degree. The working class, that is where Republicans have gained even since the beginning of the Donald Trump administration. The Democratic base is now those with a college degree. Among the working class, those without a college degree, Republicans have overwhelmingly gained on this all-important question of which party cares more for people like yourself.
Now, if you're wondering why college educated is still against President Trump, it's because academia is 99% liberal, okay? They are continuing to see things from a progressive lens, not a conservative lens, okay? You name me one conservative professor that you know, and I'll be waiting, okay? So no shocker there, but that explains why those numbers have changed over time and why what President Trump is doing is remarkable. And to add insult to injury, here on The View today is Scott Galloway actually arguing against bringing back manufacturing jobs. Watch this.
It would be hard to think of a more elegant way to reduce prosperity this fast. Let's talk about Apple. The notion was we were going to bring back all those great jobs. The average Apple assembly person in China makes $500 a month. The average Apple employee focusing on more high-value things like design, store management, makes $200,000 a year here. We want to wear Nikes. We don't want to make them. We have outsourced low-wage jobs overseas such that we can create more profits, more investments, and create higher-wage jobs. If these tariffs hold, your iPhone's going to go from $1,000 to $2,300. To make an iPhone in the U.S., it would cost $3,500. As a result, the threats of these tariffs take Apple stock down the value of Walmart in 3 days. If these tariffs hold, 80% of toys under the Christmas tree are from China. So 90% of U.S. households are budget constrained.
Yeah, so maybe he doesn't realize it, but he just described the problem that people like him, who think like him, especially Wall Street and people in D.C., the problem that they have caused for the average American, what they've done to our country, where they have made our country dependent on China. You don't think that needs to be fixed? So you're saying that you'd rather America become a slave to China than to become the ultimate dominant force that we know we are. I mean, just come on, just if you're really all about China, just say that. Yeah, so let me get your reaction to Democrats claiming they regret voting for the SAVE Act and also that they want to fight against voter ID. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comment section below. Now, last night, there was a bombshell ruling from the Supreme Court where they sided 9-0 with the lower court judge. This is in regards to the deported man that needs to be returned back to America, according to that judge. Now, if you missed out on that story and the details, all you have to do is click on that video because it's coming up right now.